Point's origin and show starts when Silver Spark, Elbow, and Rippy Roo officially join the main team as junior members. Laser Blast and Silver Spark immediately take a liking to each other, and Laser Blast comes up with convenient excuses for alone time with Silver. From what little there is of them on screen, Silver is absolutely infatuated with Laser. Partly because of his flashy attitude, his years of experience, the air of mystery around him, and definitely the confidence. These two were in the early honeymoon phase of their relationship. Elbow's graphic daydream involving the weird sucker French kiss sequence tells the whole story. If these two weren't working, they were doing other things. Very often, and very enthusiastically. Besides tonsil hockey with Silver, Laser Blast has a series of questionable projects he's been working on in a secret donut shop lair. Dr. Grayman, the brains behind Point, discovered 2 of Laser's mysterious orbs, and the consensus was these were made by villains. When Laser suggests using them to stop bad guys, Grayman immediately shuts him down, citing that they're too dangerous for anyone to use. Grayman accidentally sets off one of the orbs and loses all of his powers. The new mission is find and apprehend the perpetrator. Laser prioritizes covering up his lair and experiments. He's more concerned about his image and standing than the well-being of his teammate. When he goes with Silver and Elbow to scope out the donut shop, he insists on going first, and alone. He puts on a show about how brave he is, and promises Silver he'll be back. Then Laser enters the donut shop and disappears into a black hole. Silver is heartbroken and devastated. She blames Elbow for keeping her from potentially making it in time for that small possible window of opportunity to save Laser. This causes a rift in their friendship for years after. Point unceremoniously drops Elbow and plants him as solely responsible for Laser's death. After that, Elbow slowly finds new meaning in actualization as Mr. Gar. It's so painful for him to think about his past. He prefers to consider Elbow as dead as Laser Blast is. Even after Carol has made peace with losing Laser, Mr. Gar is racked with guilt and grief. He still blames himself and puts up a wall between himself and Carol, despite her attempts to reach out or reconnect for a long time. In a nutshell, Carol becomes more emotionally mature, patient, and empathetic with time and introspection. She understands the importance of open, honest communication, and that's what repairs, even strengthens, her relationship with Mr. Gar once he actually talks to her. Laser made it out of the donut shop in time to avoid the black hole, and hides in a nearby storm drain. The evidence that he is responsible for the spheres is gone, but he hears Silver say he wasn't powerful enough to get out. That comment is enough to seriously wound Laser's ego. He retreats, ashamed, and feeling small and vulnerable. He lost his powers. In his mind, he's nothing without his powers. He's too insecure to face Silver Spark or anybody else. The idea of her being more powerful, that she'd potentially push him out of the way, or underestimate his abilities, is something he can't bear. So he starts desperately experimenting on himself and trying to regain his superpowers. He's connected so much of his self-worth to how powerful he was, that he doesn't know who he is without special powers. Until he can regain his former glory, he refuses to return to Point, or his former life. And he doesn't trust Silver, or anyone else enough to be vulnerable or weak in any way around them. In a way, Laser's reaction to Silver can be roughly approximated to how toxic masculinity can affect how a man views himself. Men are supposed to be strong providers. They can't show any weakness. They're the master, the cornerstone of the financial health and overall lifeblood of the household. When a man ties all of his value to a specific personal trait, like how much money he makes, or how strong he is, it's a threat when his partner makes more money than him, or she's more proficient than him at his thing. This single trait is such an important piece of his personhood that it might as well be him. It's difficult to extricate that piece and figure out a healthier approach to who he is outside of that one trait. And he's not going to talk to his partner when she seems more like a rival than a friend. For all intents and purposes, Laser Blast, at least the idea of who Laser Blast might have been, died. He becomes Professor Venomous, a respected, renowned villain that's a threat because of his scientific prowess, and powerful because of what status and money he gains as a result. He's more satisfied and satiated as a villain than he ever was as a hero. The ideas that Point balked at are celebrated and encouraged by his fellow villains. It's liberating. While Laser Blast was Mask, Professor Venomous is the closest he's been to full self-actualization. It's not full self-actualization, but he's happier as a villain than he ever was as a hero. Enter Fink. She's arguably the most important character and interpersonal relationship Venomous has. There's ample hints that Venomous rescued her from a rough life surviving by herself out in the streets. They call each other boss and minion respectively, but it's just a title. Fink is his adopted daughter. When Fink talks about him, it's with strong respect, admiration, and affection. He's a patient, gentle parent at his best. He brings Fink to every event he's allowed to. He makes sure that Fink has what appropriate weapons or toys she needs at an outing. Out of everyone Venomous interacts with, Fink has seen and intimately knows a kinder, softer side of him. It's why she stands by him, despite everything. Despite their strong relationship, though, Venomous still avoids bigger confrontations. He ran away from Carol, and avoids the reality of KO as his son when he's Professor Venomous. So when Fink starts complaining, he throws expensive toys, video games, and gadgets at her to appease her. Usually, Venomous offsets these materialistic solutions with talking to her at her level or active parenting. Though, at the height of the later shadowy figure debacle, Venomous has completely given up when he uses gifts as the only means of interacting with Fink, period. This is speculation, but it's interesting that Venomous never actively talks about himself as dad until it's a direct confrontation between shadowy Venomous and KO. Perhaps Venomous uses a set of mental gymnastics to place some degree of separation between his father-daughter relationship with Fink and his non-existent relationship with KO. Fink is his minion. She is an important piece of his daily operations as a villain. As long as KO doesn't know or realize his true identity, Venomous doesn't have to think about the fact that he abandoned his son. There's a lot of complicated baggage attached to a potential relationship with KO. If Venomous wanted to successfully navigate how they could foster a father-son relationship, or at least a friendly dynamic, it means he'd have to be more honest and introspective with himself than he's willing to. Throughout the show, viewers are introduced to KO's dark alter ego, TKO. TKO is initially treated as a separate entity. He's angry, he's frustrated, he's angsty. He wants to watch the world burn as a means of catharsis, and for his own entertainment. The truth is that TKO is a manifestation of KO's unresolved feelings about his absentee dad, always following the rules without intensely questioning why things work a certain way, questioning authority figures in general. It boils down to TKO is a personification of the existential angst that comes attached with KO growing up and becoming better acquainted with the workings of the world around him. Shadowy Figure is introduced as Professor Venomous's equivalent to TKO. Venomous thought he was content with power accumulated through money and villainous feats. That was enough for a long time, but then Venomous reached the pinnacle of villainy. He had inventions like a giant death ray, an easy button for threatening the squeamish congresswoman for obscene amounts of ill-gotten wealth. When Venomous started seeing there was more to Lord Boxman and his snidely Whiplash-esque rivalry with Lakewood Plaza, he realized he'd been in the throes of ennui. Throwing his resources and talents behind Boxman reignited his love of villainy. Boxman knew how to take risks and have fun. Unlike other villains, evil wasn't a careful, calculated set of moves, or a set of ideas that need to be run through bureaucratic red tape. Boxman's attacks leveled up in a deeply gratifying way for both of them. Yes, Venomous had a partner and lifestyle that were a fantastic fit for him, but he still hadn't confronted the trauma of losing his powers years ago. Consciously, he thought he had moved on, but really, he'd bottled up these feelings and resentment for so long, they took on a life of their own. That's where the active split between Venomous and Shadowy starts. Venomous's former glory isn't enough anymore. Now, it's a ravenous ghost that demands bigger, better, more terrifying, power that can match, if not more deeply fulfill. How long these feelings of dissatisfaction have sat untouched? When Shadowy looks at KO, he sees a direct outlet for achieving his deepest desires. Power is represented as a Dragon Ball Z-esque energy source that can destroy planets or even the universe at large. It's simultaneously an in-show love letter to shonen battle nonsense, while acting as an abstract stand-in for a parent living vicariously through their child. Shadowy figure is the beginning phases of an overzealous parent pressuring their kid to become the sports star, the Harvard law doctor, or any number of other concepts. The parent wasn't able to achieve this goal for whatever reason, but then they look at their child as a malleable lump of clay. The child is an extension of themselves. The last chance to achieve this dream the parent holds as their penultimate achievement. This dream is more important to the parent than everything, to the degree it supersedes the fact their child is an autonomous, independent being with their own wants, dreams, and needs for their life. The child has become a tool. While there is still a degree of separation between Venomous and Shadowy, it's brief hope that he can catch himself and pump the brakes on how he's overstepping with KO. When he outright calls himself Shadowy Venomous, he's completely surrendered to his need for power. Shadowy Venomous is the realization of who and what he thought he wanted to be. It's the means to a horribly self-destructive bender. He can do whatever he wants. Nothing is a challenge or threat to his self-esteem now, because no one is more powerful, and if they are, he has means to make himself greater. KO has a solid support system between Carol and his adoptive family Mr. Gar, Enid, and Rad. Though, even with a solid support system, KO wanted some kind of relationship with his bio-dad Venomous. Parent-child relationships can be really complicated and messy. Even if a child has a fantastic mom and stepdad, the right combination of feeling unheard, misplaced, or having certain emotional needs unaddressed can make the originally absent parent appealing. Even if this other parent hasn't contributed as much, there's a want for their attention and validation. They're here now. They're trying now. They have something other loved ones can't offer. More importantly, it's a means to fill an existential hole in their life. When KO takes a moment to acknowledge TKO as part of himself that he's been grossly neglecting, he starts learning the importance of self-love, and that acknowledging and accepting his trauma is part of growing as a person. He's been able to empathize and show compassion for everybody else around him, but he refused to give himself the same kindness and patience. Shadowy Venomous exploited this. TKO hoped that Shadowy would listen to and commiserate with him in a way nobody else was, because Shadowy seemingly had a similar chip on his shoulder. They're mirrors of each other, right? That's what the wanton destruction and chaos are all about. When KO finally gives himself the consideration he needed, he realized that looking to Shadowy was never about him. It was only about being the convenient part that Shadowy needed. Shadowy was never interested in really reaching out and developing a meaningful connection with him. Because of his self-reflection, KO's relationships with his chosen family will be fuller and richer because he's including his inner voice as part of those intimate, heavy, vulnerable conversations with loved ones. Despite Professor Venomous royally fucking up, the ending montage in the last episode shows he's not completely irredeemable. KO deliberately asks about him too. At the very least, KO still cares about the professor. The president of the universe gives Venomous a personal planet to destroy. In a way, that's Venomous finally confronting how much losing his powers years ago affected him. He has a healthier means to process his feelings around that sensitive subject, and it's highly effective. He repairs his relationship with Fink. He's a more active parent than he was previously, and encourages her interests more. There's a scene where he tells Fink that he doesn't like video games, and suggests she practices her piano scales while he's gone instead of further gameplay. Years later, he's enthusiastically cheering her on from the audience after she, presumably, became a professional gamer and won a gaming tournament. Venomous also apologizes to Lord Boxman after their messy breakup during his spiraling as Shadowy Venomous. One sequence features a wedding ring! The bulk of these scenes are very fill-in-the-blank or connect-the-dots, but they're powerful. Seeing Professor Venomous with a wedding ring means that he learned how to have a vulnerable conversation with Boxman, and that they trust each other enough to make that serious of a commitment. Previous scenes are very much coded as them having a gay romance and building a blended family as business partners, but this cements it and cinches these last few parts of Professor Venomous's character arc. It's honestly beautiful how Venomous comes around to his equivalent of the healthy, satisfying life and family that Carol has between Mr. Gar and KO. A redemption arc isn't realistic for every person that fits the Professor Venomous mold, but it's meaningful to see a character like this work on himself. As an older fan, it's appreciated how much attention and care are given to found family for all these characters in a variety of situations and circumstances.